It does clog your arteries, so there's that. All right, that was fun though, right? That was fun. That was fun. And just yeah, see, everybody loves The Price is Right. Everybody loves playing a little putt in church. But just like every other game that we play in our youth on Tuesday nights, everything always ties back directly to what we're going to be talking about today. Because with this game, it's always fun to come up here and win prizes and take these gifts home. I know Hannah's going to be psyched. Her parents not so psyched that I gave her a giant bag of candy to take home with her. That's the good candy, too. I'm talking about we got some Twix, Snickers, Milky Ways, Three Musketeers. That's the good stuff right there. So that's a good gift, right? But aren't we so glad that God doesn't make us jump through hoops to receive the gifts that He has to give us? And that's why I think it's so important today that we talk about what we're going to be talking about today. And that is the spiritual gifts. Because these gifts are gifts that are given freely by God, and gifts that sometimes we ignore a little bit too much as Baptists. I feel like sometimes, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, I feel like sometimes, especially in our Baptist denomination, sometimes we fear being a little bit Pentecostal too much. We're like, man, if we start getting in the Spirit too much, they're going to start thinking I'm like these folk over here, and I really don't want that. But these spiritual gifts are amazing things that God has given us for a purpose. So that's why we're going to be going over them today. I'm going to start off with a little bit of Greek today, okay? We're not going to go too deep into it, so I'm going to make this quick. But as we read through this part right here, we got to ask ourselves the question, what are the spiritual gifts that Paul is trying to describe to us here? And as you read through these first 6 verses especially, there's 5 words that he uses to characterize these gifts that God is giving us. We're only going to focus on 4 of them right now until we move on to the next section, because I don't want y'all to be going to sleep while I'm up here trying to teach. But we see here in verse 1 where we start off. Now concerning spiritual gifts. And if you have a Bible like mine, the gifts part, it might be italicized in your Bible. That's because that's one of the words that we kind of infer to go in there, trying to make it a smoother reading for us in English. Because the word he uses here is just one word in the Greek language. And it can be translated as now concerning the spirituals. It might say some of that in some of your Bibles. But the word he uses here really gives us an insight into what these spiritual gifts are. And the word he uses here is pneumatikon, okay? And my Greek dialect is not good, so I'm going to say it in Southern Greek, okay? So if y'all can forgive me, that's just how I've got to pronounce these things. But when we break up this word, it really gives us a good idea of what he's talking about here. When you break up this word, you got the first part, pneuma. Pretty easy. It means spirit. It can mean wind, spirit, things like that. But in this context, it definitely means spirit. So you got pneuma, and then the next part, you got the last part, ikon. And that part means controlled by. So when we're talking about these spiritual gifts, the first thing that we see is that they are spirit controlled. So you can flick over to the next one. They are spirit controlled. They are not things that we necessarily have by ourselves, but they are 100% coming from God and are controlled by the Spirit that is living inside of us. So that's the first thing that we see. The next thing, we jump down to verse 4, right? And verse 4 reads, now, there are a variety of gifts, but the same Spirit. And the word that he used for gifts there is the word charisma, is what it is. And charisma, it means gift, but it means something more than just a gift. When you see the word charisma in the Bible, it's not just a gift that you get, it's a gift that is received by grace, which means it's something that we don't deserve. It's a gift that is given freely to us. So that's the next thing you see. So we see that spiritual gifts are 1, they are spirit controlled. They are 2, given to us by given to us by grace from God. And then in verse 5, we read in here, and it says, and there are a variety of ministries in the same Lord. And that word for ministry that we have there is, y'all might have heard this one before because it sounds a lot like a word we have today. Oh goodness, I'm so bad at Greek. Diakonia is the name that we have there. And that means serve. So these gifts are controlled by the Spirit. They are a gift received by grace from God, and they are to be used for the service of the body. And then we jump to verse 6, and it says there are varieties of effects, but the same God who works, that's the key word in there, works all things in all persons. And that word works there is the word energeio. And what that means is that it is energized by God. God is the one feeding into it here. So, this gives us a pretty basic understanding just from the words alone of what these spiritual gifts, like what constitutes the spiritual gifts here that Paul is telling us about. So just to rerun over the list, you can see them up there. Spiritual gifts are spirit-controlled. That is the Spirit living inside of us that is working these things in us and through us that doesn't inherently come from within ourselves, but is things that are either comes directly from the Spirit or things inside of us that are amplified by the Spirit. Next, these are gifts that are received by grace directly from God. These are things that we do not deserve, but these are things that God gives to us freely. And it's up to us to accept these gifts that God is giving us. Next, we see that all of our gifts, all these things that God gives us are meant for the service of the body. They aren't meant for us to just keep shut up inside of us, but they are meant to be used. They are meant to be used in service of the church. That's something we're going to talk about more in depth as I move throughout this sermon. And then lastly, we see that they are energized by God, meaning the energy from the Spirit, the energy that are going into these gifts that we have is coming directly from God. It is God who has given us the energy to do these things. It's God who is empowering us to do the things that we do through the Spirit. So when we talk about spiritual gifts, these are 4 things that we have to keep in mind while we are discussing this. Now as we move on to kind of talk about spiritual gifts a little bit more in depth, looking at the text here instead of just the Greek words, because who just wants to stare at Greek words all day, right? Like, that's not too fun. Tells you a lot, but, you know, there's a reason that people say it's Greek to me. Not the most fun subject. Not the most fun. So as we dig into the text, the first thing that we see in verses 1 through 3 is that Paul is explicitly saying that these gifts are for believers only. These gifts are not something that are given to people outside of the church, but they have to be people who are followers of Christ within the church. So we read through this. I'm going to reread them again. It says, "Now concerning the spiritual gifts, brethren, that I do not want you to be unaware. You know that when you were pagans, you were led astray to mute idols, however you were led. Therefore, I make known to you that no one speaking by the Spirit of God says Jesus is accursed, and that no one can say that Jesus is Lord except by the Holy Spirit." So as you read through the entire book of 1 Corinthians, the first 11 chapters are really dealing with lostness. It's dealing with people who are in a lost state, people how to deal with unbelievers and the characteristics of unbelievers and things like that. And it's when we get to chapter 12 that we start to see this shift in dynamic of Paul's writing. The next few chapters really are the ones that are going to be dealing with spiritual gifts, but more over the rest of the book is really dealing with the life of the saved. So this is where the turning point is in the book of Corinthians. So we're seeing that Paul's talking about, he's showing the difference between unbelief and belief. He's saying you were once unbelievers, but now you're believers. And now that you're believers, you have the Spirit living in you. And this is the same Spirit that Jesus promised to His disciples in John 14. John 14, 16 through 18, Jesus talking with His disciples, and He tells them, he's kind of speaking of, he's like, giving them the rundown as He typically does. He's saying, hey, I'm about to dip out of here. I'm about to go. You're not going to see me anymore. I'm going to be gone. But what He's saying is, then He says this, I will ask the Father, and He will give you another helper, that He may be with you forever. That is the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it does not see Him or know Him. But you know Him, because He abides with you and will be in you. And I will not leave you as orphans. I will come to you. So we see that Jesus clearly stated here that upon His ascension, a helper would come. And that helper is the Holy Spirit, which is really an amazing thing to think about, because, when Jesus was here on earth, when he was doing his earthly ministry, Jesus had a human body just like us, flesh, bone, just like us, right? So Jesus couldn't be multiple places at one time. Jesus had to be kind of where he was at that time. Glorified body, that's a different story, but we're talking about Jesus' ministry. But now Jesus has ascended. It's better for us because now each and every one of us has something that is equal with Jesus, equal with God the Father, that lives inside of us at all times. That lives inside of us, it indwells us, is what the Bible tells us. And I feel like that's something that we really take for granted way too often. Because, again, we have a tendency not to focus on the Holy Spirit that much. But when we talk about the Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, all co-equal with each other. God is living inside of us, inside of me. If you are a Christian here today, there's never a second in your Christian life where God is not living inside of you. That is crazy. The same God who spoke the world and the universe into existence, the same God who said, "Let there be light," and boom, there was light out of nothingness. The same God who said, "Let there be a sun, moon, and stars," and boom, sun, moon, and stars all across the universe appeared. The same God who, out of nothing, created everything that we know today, every creature that we see on the land and the sea, all the beautiful sunsets we see at night. The same God that created all these things, the power behind all that, lives inside of us. It's amazing to think about. So why do we ignore this part so much? Why do we not talk about the Spirit more? I feel like it's one of the most vital things in our Christian walks today. Because as Jesus said, He is our helper. And I don't know about y'all, I need help a lot. Like a lot. If God left me here to do it on my own, I'd be a mess. See, we are given the Spirit as a helper, but too often we reject His help. And in turn, when we're rejecting His help, we're grieving the Spirit, as is mentioned in Ephesians 4:30. And Paul explicitly says, he's like, do not grieve the Spirit. That's not something we need to do. As Christians, we should be living lives where the Spirit is leading us and guiding us. Not lives where we're kind of like, all right, Spirit, I will take your opinion into consideration, but I have judged that in my best interest, I think this course of action over here is the way I need to take my life. That's not how we're supposed to live our lives as Christians. We need to live lives that are submitted to God, that are submitted to the Spirit, the Helper that is living inside of us to take us where we need to be, to the things that we need to do, and the places we need to go, and ultimately the people we need to reach. And I believe that if we want to grow as a church, and when I mean grow, I mean deeper in faith of the people who are here, as well as in numbers from people who are outside of this church, that we need to embrace the Spirit more as a collective. Because it is the power behind our church. Behind everything we do is the power of the Spirit. And again, the reason we have that power is because it is a gift from God that He has given freely for believers only. The next point we read as we go through kind of the chunk of the text here really is that, so through verses 4 and 11, we see that the spiritual gifts, they're varied. There's various gifts and they're varied among people. So as we read through this, you can see there's a bunch of different gifts that are listed here. I'm talking about anything from, we got some speaking in tongues, we got some prophecies, we got all sorts of different gifts here. But did you know this is not the only point in the Bible where spiritual gifts are mentioned or listed? So I'm pulling up. I took a picture on my phone because I didn't feel like typing them all out. But that's youngins, But this, like I said, this is not the only part where spiritual gifts are listed. Of course, we got a bunch of them listed here. Some of the ones that are listed here in 1 Corinthians, we have wisdom, knowledge, faith, healing, works of miracles, prophecy, ability to distinguish spirits, various tongues, and the interpretation of tongues. But we also have in Romans chapter 12 another list that includes prophecy, service, teaching, exhortation, generosity, leading, and acts of mercy. And then we go to Ephesians chapter 4. We were just talking about grieving the Spirit a minute ago. And in this one we have apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. And then in 1 Peter we got a small list, but it's still a list nonetheless of 2. And we have speaking and service gifts. Why do I say all this? I say to say there are a ton of gifts that God has given us. And most scholars agree, I'm just going to avoid that word for a second. Most scholars agree that when it comes to the gifts, when we read all through this and that none of these gifts say the exact same thing, that the list that we're given here in the Bible are probably not exhaustive of the gifts that God has given us. There's probably a multitude more of gifts that are out there that just, weren't listed in our Bible. Because you got to think, each of us are individuals. God has made each of us uniquely. And through that uniqueness, God works through the Spirit for us to be the part of the church we need to be, which is what we're going to be talking about. So, let's say all that to say. Go to my next page. It's also debated, so lots of gifts. More so than what's just written here in the Bible. And it's also debated whether spiritual gifts are directly related to the special characteristics that God has given us, that uniqueness, who God made us to be, things that we already have aptitudes for, or whether they're things that, the Spirit just gives us that we never had the aptitude in us to do ourselves. When you start reading up on a lot of this stuff, you see a lot of scholars on one side, and they're wagging their finger at the other side, and they're like, this is definitely not the case. And you have the other authors like, you are so wrong. And I'm kind of summing up. They do it in much more, what's the word? They sound real fancy when they're saying these arguments, but that's the gist of it right there. I tend to think it's more both. You have people who take my opinion, because I tend to think that God not only uses the things that He's already uniquely made into us and amplifies those gifts, those unique physical and attributes He's already made into us, but He also gives us parts where He just pulls stuff out of the blue in our lives, and He's like, wow, and you're kind of like, wow, I never even knew that was possible for me to do. And when I think about this, I think about my own life as I'm kind of going over this. And I'm very aware that God has given me a gift. He's given me a gift to preach and to teach and do all these other things. There's a few more I think I got an aptitude for, but that's outside of the focus of today. The thing is, in my life, I've always been a very extroverted person. I could talk to a brick wall. There's no doubt about it. I am just the kind of person who I love to talk to people. It's all good. And I've always had the ability to talk in front of large crowds. That's never been a problem for me. When I was in college, I was a recruiter for my college I was at. And I, on a regular basis, got in front of hundreds and hundreds of kids. And I say kids, high schoolers. And I would talk about college and stuff. It was never a big deal. Never a big deal. So I know that is something that's already inside of me that God has made into me. And I say that to say that although I have the ability to speak in front of large crowds on my own, when I'm preaching, it's very different than when I'm doing it like that, in that sort of environment. And I think anybody who's ever been a preacher or anything, they can definitely attest to what I'm saying, because there's a major responsibility upon the person who sits behind this pulpit and is responsible for teaching people the Word of God. There is nothing more important than making sure that the person who is speaking behind this pulpit is getting the things they are getting out of this right. That's a major responsibility. So even though God has given me that aptitude to really speak in front of people, be able to speak to just kind of anybody, it's very difficult for me to get up here and speak on Sundays, even on Wednesday nights, or whenever I'm asked to go speak at special things. There's nerves that work in there. There's things in my life that I really don't want to go into, things that happened beforehand that I'm just man, I don't know if I can do this. But then I see each and every time God is faithful to pull me through these things. Whenever I get up to speak, no matter how nervous I might be before, how anxious I might be about it, God's Spirit always gives me that sense of peace and comfort as I go up to the pulpit. And as I'm preaching and as I'm doing my sermon prep, it's as if God is directly revealing to me what I need to know to put into my sermon. And even sometimes I'm up here preaching, there's things I don't even have wrote down up here that's like, God's like almost whispering in my ear, things like, hey, that'd be something good to say right now. And I'm like, thanks, God, that's a good one. And then I throw it out there for y'all. And then typically that's like the best point I make all day. And I'm like, man, I didn't even have that one wrote down. But I say all this to say, we have our aptitudes, we have our parts about us that God has already made for us. But the Spirit, it enhances, it makes us more than what we think that we can be. Because that is the power of God living inside of us. He takes us places far greater than we ever think we could go on our own. And that's why, again, I'm going to keep reiterating this point. That's why it is so vital for us as a church to lean into the Spirit and the gifts that God has given us. It's important to know also that not everybody has the same gifts. Though I might be gifted in this way, it doesn't mean that you have to be gifted in this way. You know, we read in here that not everybody has all the gifts to start off with. Some were given as prophets, some were given as teachers and preachers, some were given as evangelists and apostles. But not one person was all those things inside. So each one of us has our own unique gifts that God has given us. So the question might be going through your head right now. How do I know what my spiritual gift is? And that's really, we can't go too deep down that rabbit hole today, but I can tell you that the best answer to this question won't be found by asking somebody what your best spiritual gift is, or going online, because if you just go on Google and be like, how do I know my spiritual gift? You'll see about 153 different links that pop up. It's like, take this quiz to show me what your spiritual gift is. And you're like, bet. And you start clicking on things that ask you questions and all that, and it's like, no good, okay? The best way to find out what your spiritual gift is to commit yourself to the service of the church, the service of the body, and put yourself in situations that make you uncomfortable. Ooh. We don't like feeling uncomfortable, do we? We don't like stepping out of our comfort zone. But outside of our comfort zone, though, when we step out of our comfort zone, that's when you get to the point in your life when you have to rely on God. When you have to rely on that Spirit. And that's when you find out, it's like, man, God has gifted me in this area. God has gifted me in this. Well, I'm not going to lie to you. Sometimes you may take that step of faith into outside your comfort zone, and you'll be like immediately like, nope, that's not where God has me, and you go right back over here. It's trial and error, but you eventually find your spot. You find where God has you, the gifts that God has given you. So the best way to know your spiritual gift is, again, to commit yourself to the service of the church and put yourself in these situations outside of your comfort zone where you can test to see, has God gifted me in this way? Has God gifted me in that way? And I say this because this leads into our last point of the day, and that is spiritual gifts are ultimately for the edification of the church, the body of Christ. Every gift that we are given is not given for us. They are just things that are given to us for a temporary time that we need to be good stewards of. The reason they're given to us is because we are used like tools in the hands of God for the improvement of His church, for the growth and development of the people within, and the evangelism of the people on the outside of it. Because many times we might feel inadequate in our responsibilities, but also in our abilities to either lead, to administer, to teach, to disciple people, to evangelize people. We feel inadequate in those abilities. And this is the purpose of the Holy Spirit, is to help empower us where we fall short. Because as a body of believers, as the church, it is our responsibility to make sure we're keeping things up to snuff around here. Because the church isn't just us. The church, we're the bride of Christ. And one day, we'll be presented to Him in splendor. And In the church, it is extremely, extremely important to the heart of God. Many of y'all are married in here. Think about how precious your wife or your husband is to you. That is how we are to God, to Jesus. So we need to make sure we're doing our part to live up, to be the bride that He is expecting us to be. And this is why we have a helper, so that we can be the bride that Christ deserves. And lastly, again, reiterating the point, not everyone has the same gifts for the same reason that not every part of our body has the same function. We read this at the very end. In verse 12 it says, For even as a body is one, and yet has many members, and all the members of the body, though there are many, are one body, so also is Christ. For by one Spirit we all were baptized into one body, whether Jew or Greeks, whether slaves or free, and we're all made to drink of one Spirit. Our church, that's why we call ourselves, we're a body of believers. And those gifts that God has given us directly correlates to what part of the body we are. As God, just simplifying this, if God has chosen, hey, Cayman, you're to be a hand. And I decide, and He gives me gifts especially to be a hand. And I'm like, I really would like to be an eyeball, God. And my hand starts trying to do eyeball things. That's not going to work out too well, huh? Or, I don't know, or if my hands tried to be like feet or something like that, and I was just like walking around doing handstands all day, like, people be looking at me like I'm crazy. God has given us these gifts to fulfill these specific roles within the body that He has placed for us. Because when the body is working together and when the body is working, as one, then we see it's able to do incredible things. It'd be like if I was standing up here and like everything was working on my body except for like my right leg, and like so I was like walking around like this, and I was like having to like drag my right leg behind me. That's what it's like when people are when they're grieving the Spirit and when they're ignoring the roles that they want, and like they just come to church and they're here to just sit down, listen to a sermon, and then they leave and their lives are unchanged with no service to the church. God has called us and God has empowered us to be more than just people who come to church on a Sunday and sit in pews. And again, I say it again. If we want to grow as a church, both internally in faith and externally in numbers, we need to do our parts. We need to embrace these gifts that God has given us. And we need to embrace the roles that God has given us in the church. And we need to be stepping out of our comfort zones to find out what gifts God has given us and exactly what role He wants us to play within this body. So in closing, I'll ask, have you surrendered your life to God so that you can enjoy these gifts? It's the first thing we said. You can't enjoy these gifts that God has for us unless you are a believer. There's no way around it. That's the first question you need to ask yourself today. Another question is, are you walking with the Spirit? Are you being filled daily, or are you grieving the Spirit in your own life? Do you feel like you are fulfilling your role within this body of believers as it should be and using the gifts that God has given you, or do you think that you're ignoring these things that God has placed and the calling God has placed on your life? If you don't have a personal relationship with Jesus, and if you're not able to partake in these gifts because of it, there's no better day than today to make it right. Because there is nothing better, there's nothing that this world can give you that is better than what Jesus has to offer. This world gives us cheap imitations that look pretty to our eyes, but always in the end spoil and sour. So, as we close today, the altar's always open. If you want to come, you need to talk to me or Brother Sam. Or if you need to come up here and pray, confess, do whatever you need to do, whatever you feel like God's putting on your heart, whatever the Spirit is stirring inside of you. what this closing time is for. So, as Brother Sam and Miss Anita make their way up, so we're going to pray. And you want to pray, Brother Sam? You want me to pray, man?
Why don't you pray?
All right. We'll do that. So everybody will bow their heads.